Welcome to the Creative Community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guest this time is artist Bay Hallowell. Bay, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's been a while, right, since we last spoke? What, 10 or 15 years maybe?
At least.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have you back. I am, as you know, a great fan of your work, and I think that folks who don't know it are really going to enjoy seeing it today. Before we get going, and we have a lot of images to look at, can you just give people a real short version of your life prior to arriving in Santa Barbara?
Ooh, well.
2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, I was born in Massachusetts, raised in rural Ohio, summers on Cape Cod, went to school in Vermont, ended up living in Connecticut for a while, spent 2 different years in France, and then spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania,
right.
First in Pittsburgh and then in Philadelphia. And then finally moved to Santa Barbara from Philadelphia about 16 years ago.
Okay. And while you were in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, you were working for art museums primarily, right?
I was.
Yeah.
Yes, I fell into that career.
You were trained as an artist, but also someone able to write about art, right? So that was something that you were doing while you were there.
Yeah, I did a little bit of writing in college because I was lucky enough to study with some art critics at Bennington. But mostly I thought of myself as an artist, and once I had a family, I thought, well, maybe I'll be an art teacher because that schedule would work out.
Right.
So I started learning about art education, and then I literally fell into my first museum job at the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh.
Okay. Now, we're going to see you as a printmaker. Has that always been your main way of making art?
No. I majored in painting and drawing at Bennington. But when I moved to Santa Barbara, so many people told me about the adult ed classes. And I was lucky enough to sign up for Sue Zimmerman's class, Contemporary Printmaking, Introduction to Contemporary Printmaking. Yeah. And that I just became enamored, enchanted with it. Yeah.
Well, she must have been pretty happy to have someone of your caliber in her class as well, too.
Oh, it was such a great class. And it's you know, people take that class for years. I think I took it probably for 5 years.
Yeah.
She really creates a lovely community. She and her husband, Don, together, they've nurtured so many printmakers.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump right in. The first image that we have, Hope/Change. So tell us about what we're looking at here.
Okay, so we're in the year 2008, and I had such a busy life being a mom and working in art museums that I had never had the chance to work on a political campaign. So I was pretty excited about that, and the Hope Change mantra of Obama really appealed to me.
Right.
And one of the first techniques that Sue taught us was collograph, where you just have a plate made of cardboard or really almost anything that's skinny and thin, and you add to it, you add to the surface. I used different kinds of tape.
Oh, wow.
And I was I had been doing so much writing for my museum work that I was pretty obsessed with words. So I just kind of naturally started making word pictures. Yeah. Yeah,
and we're going to see some of those throughout our work here. And I believe this is an Ed Ruscha quote, isn't it, right?
Yeah, so 2 of the artists that I had literally never thought about or known much about at all when I was working more on the East Coast were Sister Corita Kent and Ed Ruscha, both West Coast artists who use words. So they were inspirations to me, and this word is actually redact. It's sort of hard to read that at first, but because of the way the letters are placed, but it was a word that just jumped off the page at me one day when I was reading the paper, and I learned that under George Bush, he had redacted an environmental report because he didn't want everybody to know
right.
what was in it. And I was just so shocked. I was so naive and so shocked that that could happen.
And so that on the piece of governmental paper looks like a bunch of black squares. Is that right?
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
And you have a whole series of the letters all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. So I kind of kept going with the letters. This was the TikTok series.
Okay.
And this show was actually at the library. But you can see I started really playing with where the letters are.
Uh-huh.
And I love what Ed Ruscha says about words and pictures. He says, I like the idea of a word becoming a picture, almost leaving its body, then coming back and becoming a word again. I see myself working with two things that don't even ask to understand each other.
That is reminding me of a quote. I think it's Sam Francis, order into chaos, chaos into order. It's sort of that same process of disassembling it and then reassembling it.
Yeah. And just seeing a word, seeing the letters really as an image, as a picture.
Yeah.
I just found it so captivating and powerful.
Yeah.
So I kept going with that. Well, this is the Architectural Foundation.
Right.
And I had one of my very first shows here at the Architectural Foundation, and I ended up getting pretty involved with this organization. They have just the sweetest house,
right.
Which is, part of what it is. It's this Victorian house at the corner of Garden and Victoria Streets. And when you walk in from Garden Street, you're just in this sweet little space. You're in the gallery. Yeah. It's also a meeting room. So I think I had my second show, solo show, at the Architectural Foundation. So for my show at the Architectural Foundation, I wanted to get away from words because it was too many words. It was too verbal. So I went to my yoga person self. I've studied yoga for a long time. And I did a whole series based on the chakras, which are energy centers based along the spine. And this particular print is really showing the root chakra, which is red, a deep red, and it's also showing the pelvic area chakra, and it's showing the sun chakra, the solar plexus area part of the body, which is yellow. So we've got the red and the orange and the yellow. And this was a huge revelation for me because with my background, my orientation towards color was the color wheel. And this gave me a whole new way of thinking about what colors mean. Right. And I had a lot of fun experimenting with that.
Well, when I look at that image, I mean, it just, I don't know anything about you, but it's a beautiful way to put shapes together, regardless of any deeper meaning. And that's got to be important to you as an artist, right?
Yeah. I think they do have some appeal. I mean, I found that I was working with symmetry because the chakras are on the spine, and it just that's the way it evolved.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one, which is in the same series, I think, right?
Yes, and this one was a more complicated one. This is called Anahata, which is the heart chakra, and the color associated with the heart in this yoga philosophy system is green, which completely surprised me because obviously with our Western backgrounds we think of the heart should be red.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I actually had a wonderful time sort of figuring it all out, and you can see that the other chakra colors are there, but I found a way to make it I don't know, just kind of stable, and I felt it was pretty hearty.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image.
But they're also the yellow is there, and the orange is there, and the red is there.
I think we have one more from this series.
Yeah, and this one's called Still Point, and one of the 7 limbs of yoga has to do with meditation, and this print is called Still Point, and it's got the orange, it's got the yellow, but it's also got the white, which refers to the crown chakra on the top of your head, which is clear light and connection with the divine.
Mm. One thing you and I were chatting before we started taping about commerce, you know, and this was in a gallery space where people could purchase these pieces, right?
Yes.
And you were saying to me that's not your main reason for creating art, but what does that feel like to have your work up there, and are you keen to know who bought what, or are you just trying to step back from that as much as you can?
It's, you know, I actually love it when I sell something to somebody that I know, or that someone I get to know.
Right.
This chakra series, a number of these prints went to my daughter, who is a yoga and meditation teacher in Massachusetts.
That's
and
great.
She has them hanging in her studio, her yoga studio. This print I sold to a neighbor, and so I was thrilled, you know, to sell it to someone that I know.
Right.
And
you can go visit it if you want to.
And I can go see it when I want to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see what we've got next. I think we're back to text.
Yeah, so I couldn't leave my words, my love of words, and this series is based on the word marginalia, and it's a word that I discovered in an essay written for a show at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia. And the essay was referring to artists as living often, especially women artists, living often on the edges of things. And, you know, the literal, as you obviously know, the literal meaning of marginalia is when you scribble in the margins, right? And I just was so interested in that idea of women, but then the idea kept expanding for me, that who lives on the margins of what and where and why. Right. So I found that it really fueled my experiments with colors and shapes.
Well, it's interesting too that you're taking marginalia, this word that occurs outside of the frame of the text of a book, and making it the focus, and it's practically falling off the page there. It's so big. I think that's a nice irony and appropriate one.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's see, I think we got another marginalia.
Yeah, and you know, I think the first one we just looked at is, you know, it's a little bit more ephemeral looking. And this one I felt had more of a crashing and a bashing kind of a feel to it. And someone who I admire a great deal bought this print, and that person is Sue Zimmerman.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thrilled that she has it. So you can see I go back and forth.
Right.
So here I am back again. This was my last show at the foundation, at the Architectural Foundation, and it was called Breathing Space. Again, just kind of my yoga roots, I think, and getting centered in the body, connecting with the breath, using that as a wonderful tool to settle one's spirit and to figure out how to be in the world.
Well, if we look at this for a second, I'm always super curious about the genesis of a piece. So did you have an idea for this in terms of shapes, or when you just sat down, did you just start making marks? Or, I mean, how does it, especially I know as a printmaker, you've got to have the thing ready to go, but how does this come into being?
You know, it is, I think it's an alchemical process. I made this print in Santa Fe, where I had gone to work with a master printmaker. On the way to Santa Fe, we saw those balloons in the desert. Yeah, and I think that had something to do with this.
Yeah. It's a distant reference, but it's certainly there.
Yeah. So this is another kind of printmaking altogether. This combines a lino cut that I made of the polar bear with a kind of collage technique that you can do in printmaking called chine collé. And you're gluing different pieces of paper from disparate places onto one big piece of paper. Right. But you do it all in the press. So it's complicated. You have to think it backwards. To make it happen as a print. But this print was part of a Santa Barbara printmakers show at Channing Peak. And this was the first time that I connected with poets around prints.
Right.
And Enid Osborne and I did a poetry and print event in the little auditorium there. And Enid selected my print to write a poem about. And I was so honored. And it, you know, as an artist, to have someone really look carefully at what you've made and then write about it is just a real thrill. Yeah.
Well, and you were doing that, just to go back to your days in Pennsylvania a lot. You were going up into the galleries and looking at art, and you were writing for just regular people too, right? You were writing for art scholars.
Yes, that was a big part of my museum work, was trying to make the art in the museum really available and accessible to people, and try to take some of the art history lingo, language, big words out of the equation, and just encourage people to look at art and respond to it in their own ways. And you know, it was so much fun actually to teach kids, and especially for some reason kids from the inner city had the most amazing language when they really got looking and talking about art. And I would learn things from what they said because they just had such interesting, colorful language, and they had such sharp eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the next one here. What are we looking at here?
This one incorporates language as well. There's a little poem at the bottom called "Me and You," and you know, I was just looking at the Rauschenberg show at the Art Museum recently, and I was thinking, well, this print is sort of Rauschenberg-y in a way because it's pulling images and words from different places. And it's the main print in that Rauschenberg show at the museum is called Autobiography. So it's obviously about himself. And I feel like this is kind of about me, because me and you and all the mysteries that can exist between two people.
Right.
This print has another poetry connection, but the reason I made it was because I was between series, and sometimes in order to cleanse my visual palette, I work with just black and white for a period of time. So the way I made this print was to cover a plate with black ink and then use a Q-tip to remove some of the ink. And so then I ended up with this print, which I called Disappearing Man.
It looks like he's disappearing man. So this was just entirely black, and then Q-tips made everything.
Yeah, just removing the black ink.
That's fabulous.
And then that guy just emerged.
Yeah, he was waiting
Sprinting.
to come out.
Oh, but the connection with poetry was that some poets down in Ventura saw the print and they liked it a lot and bought it. Marcia DeLao and Phil Taggart, and then they asked if they could use it for the cover of the poetry.
Spillway,
Spillway. Yeah. So that was great. I was
totally
happy.
Cool, yeah,
very happy about
now,
this.
Yoko Ono.
Here's Yoko. Okay, so this is my Ventura connection. I don't have a studio where I live, so I work at a communal studio down in Ventura.
Right.
And it's a group of artists calling themselves the Ink Spots. And we have a show every fall, and we always make a folio, which means that each artist makes a series of prints, which means you can't do just a one-of-a-kind print. Like a monoprint, you have to do a lino cut or a wood cut or an etching. So this was my lino cut of Yoko Ono, an artist I greatly admire.
Right.
She has so much pizzazz. And this is a much more complicated lino cut. This was a reduction lino cut.
And what does that mean?
That means that, it's so hard to explain.
we only have 7 minutes left, so maybe I shouldn't have asked that question.
You keep carving away. You print, you carve away more. You print another color, you carve away more. So it's something you have to think it through.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And this was an etching that I made for another Ink Spots folio. And you know, nowadays you can make an etching in a much safer, easier way by using a solar plate rather than using a metal plate with acid, which is, you know, toxic materials. So the solar plate process is a lot easier. And what I loved about doing this series was that I just printed it all in black and white, and then I hand colored them. And this was sort of coming out of my my sadness at some of the things that were happening in politics. Yeah. And again, I think this was made in 2018. So you know who had been elected, and I felt like someone needed to say, e pluribus unum, one from many, you know. Here we are in America, we're all different colors and shapes and sizes, but this is who we are. One thing I learned
I think you need to make a bunch more of those right now, too.
I thought everyone would know what e pluribus unum was, and it turned out they didn't. So I had to put it on the label that this is our national motto. This is what it means. And then, you know, again, the state of the world, truth be told, I wanted people to see that the truth is being manipulated and it's being jiggled and jazzed around.
It's out of focus,
It's out of focus, That one's another in the Truth Be Told series. This one is actually just chalk on a monoprint of a blackboard. And it's actually on view now over at the Santa Barbara Museum of Contemporary Art. There's this wonderful show going on over there. It's called The New Salon. Arte del Pueblo.
And folks may be watching this, they should check and see, because the show could be playing years from now, so we want to make sure that they. So we have 5 more to go. Let's take a look at this. This is May Gray Morning. I love this whole series because, you know, we gripe about May Gray and June gloom and no sky July and August, and you've done something about it here.
Yeah. Well, when I'm not doing yoga, I'm taking a walk.
Okay.
And I find that a very grounding, wonderful thing to do. So the May Gray series came out of my morning walks in the May Gray atmosphere. And these 2 prints were, and the Truth Be Told prints were in a wonderful show that the Arts Fund put on, and that my friend Cynthia Martin curated, and it was all about the environment. And then this is a more whimsical and a much more recent piece that I just showed at the Voice Gallery, which is run by Carrie Methner, who publishes Voice magazine. And she does a great job, and it was the Santa Barbara Printmakers often has shows there. And I, you know, became enamored with the Matisse idea of drawing with scissors. So this is a print made with stencils, and I cut the shapes out. And then I ink them and print them.
It's gorgeous.
And it's sort of an additive process, and it's just really a lot of fun to do. Okay, so now we're back at the Architectural Foundation. I ended up joining the board and becoming a member of the gallery committee there, and it's a small, really very small foundation, but it does wonderful things. The picture we just saw was a picture of kids who have won scholarships to go to school and study architecture.
That's fabulous.
This is a picture of a great program we do called the High School Design Competition. And kids can come and they're given a real architectural problem to solve by real live architects who then give them feedback.
Oh, that's great.
And then they win prizes, and some of them go on to become architects who practice in Santa Barbara.
I see a super tall head in the background there.
Yeah, this was a recent show that we had at the foundation of Ruth Leaf, who's a wonderful printmaker. And I connected with Melinda Polizio, the current poet laureate, and we did a poetry and print event. And David and a bunch of other poets wrote poems in response to Ruth's prints, and then they came and read them. And it was such a great day. Thank you all for doing that.
Well, and I ended up buying the print that I wrote about, so.
You're not alone. Some of the other poets did too.
Well, boy, I feel like I could ask you questions for another 3 hours, Bae, but we only have about 1 minute and 20 seconds left. So in that, is there one piece of advice that you would give to, especially aspiring printmakers out there? What's your 20 or 30-second word?
Well, I'm going to say two things.
Okay, two things.
One is that you just got to do the work.
Okay.
You just got to show up for work, and whether you feel like it or not,
right.
you just got to do it. But you also need to connect with people, and that's why my work at the foundation has been so great, because as a sort of curator of the shows that happen there, and I work with a committee, and we get to meet a lot of artists and support a lot of artists, and it's just really important to do that kind of work as well, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a great pleasure, and I hope people will go to your website, which is
BaeHallowell.com.
That's a great name for a website. Bae, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
The Creative Community is a co-production of TVSB in Santa Barbara and Caps Media in Ventura. I'm your host, David Starkey, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.